Surprise! I'm live. Microphones are still broken. Typical for me. Hello, how are you? Thank you for joining. I'll get started here in just a second. Just a second. Hello, how are you? Okay, there we go. Hi, New Jersey. Hope you're prepared for trolls. I didn't have that many the last time. Well, it's weird because something has been going on with the lives. It didn't seem like it did that the last time, but it's almost like we'll see if it does it this time. It's almost like they're promoting the lives out to more people, which naturally is going to attract more trolls, but it didn't seem like they did that the last time. They might do it this time. I think when I go live in the app, then it promotes it out. But I think when I do it from my StreamYard, that's my theory. But we'll see. We'll see who enters today. But I'm ready. I'm ready for all the trolls. What up, Florida? Okay, happy Friday. There is obviously a lot of tragic news that happened this week. That plane crash was absolutely horrible. There were, I believe, 14 figure skaters on there. It's a very small, tight-knit community. Some of those figure skaters were from Nancy Kerrigan's home team, her home training center. So she came out and made a statement and was visibly upset. I didn't realize what a small community it is throughout the whole world. So obviously that's very devastating. There were 67 people total that lost their lives in that flight. Some of the updates from that are, in fact, they've identified 2 pilots. There was a third they have not identified yet. And we do have information that the helicopter was above the elevation that it was supposed to be at least a half mile off track. So that's what the news is that's coming out. I did see that they found both black boxes, so hopefully we'll have a lot more information. Oh, we're gonna have trolls. The press conference yesterday by President Trump, definitely he sounded very angry. He sounded like he might have a little bit more information as to what happened. It almost seems like it was really, really serious incompetence. A lot of human error, a lot of incompetence, maybe on a few different levels, but that's what it seems like is happening right now. Bye-bye. I just block now. Okay, so some of the updates that are happening today. Oh my goodness. Yeah, here the trolls are. So it looks like when I'm in app, hide user. Yeah, if you say something gross, you're just getting removed from the channel. So just saying. I think it was a combination of the ATC and the Black Hawk pilot. Yeah, I agree. There was definitely a lot of human error, probably on multiple different levels that was happening. Some other news. The Trump administration is just, I can't even keep up with all the news that's happening right now because they are going hard. They sent out a memo earlier this morning saying that all federal employees had to remove the pronouns from their emails. So all federal employees have to remove the pronouns from their email signatures, which some people are upset about. I don't care. I don't know why you would need that in your work signature on your email anyway. I don't know why you would have that. It doesn't seem appropriate. So I'm okay with that. Having to remove pronouns. What else is happening? You also had letters that were sent to employees, and some of these are FAA employees. Saying that they have 8 months. They're encouraged to look for jobs in the private sector if they want, but you have about 2 million federal employees. Some of them are with the FAA, but this wasn't because of the crash. This was happening before. They sent out a memo to all of these employees basically telling them you have you have till February 6th. You can either keep your job, you're going to have higher standards, and your job still might be on the chopping block, or you can choose to take a buyout that we're offering and you can stay. You can stay on your pay, but you won't be working for 8 months. We'll pay you for 8 months through September 30th, and then you can go somewhere else, work, and live a happy life. Go on vacation, do whatever you want. We don't care, but don't come into work. So I'm not mad at that at all. Oh, and the drones. So I actually had a theory about the drones. So the drones, we were told in the press conference that they were approved by the FAA. We don't know why though. And it was approved. It wasn't any enemy or anything like that. It was approved by the FAA. And that it wasn't an enemy. They were for research purposes. And then they said, obviously, people started getting curious after that of flying their own drones, wanting to see what happened. I actually believe that. I just don't understand why the Biden administration didn't say anything earlier, why they just kind of let it go. They actually have a really big program that they're going to be encouraging more drone use in the future. It has nothing to do with like smart cities or anything like that. But they do have a program where they wanted to use more drones in the future, and it was going to be tested around in that area. I can't find the documents. So to me, I was like, maybe they're just doing this. They're doing research, but why did they keep that a secret? That's what I don't understand. And also, one of the responses I would have liked to come from the press secretary, even this type around, was just be like, hey, this is what it was. Here's the document. This is exactly what they were researching. This is what they were doing. But they didn't even say that. They just kind of said, it was approved. Don't worry about it. Move along. Don't worry, I'm taking them off. Okay. I'm trying to remove them. I don't know where they come from. It's when I go on live in the app, because somehow it promotes it out. When I go on live on my StreamYard, it's so weird. Everyone in New Jersey is getting probed. Research purposes, Here's the press briefing.
Building your online business? Go to Wix.com and set up your store on a single...
I'm fixing. Thank you guys very much. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Here we go at the beginning.
Transportation Friday. It's great to be back with you. I want to provide an update on President Trump's actions in the wake of the catastrophic air collision that tragically claimed the lives of 67 people at Reagan National Airport on Wednesday night. Everyone in this White House continues to mourn the victims and keep their friends and families in our thoughts and prayers during this unimaginable time. First, within moments of the collision,
Can
the
you guys hear
president
that?
and his newly appointed team were in immediate communication. The president was briefed on Wednesday evening following the crash, again on Thursday morning, and he has continued to receive updates as recovery efforts continue on the ground. The president, as you know, took time to address the nation yesterday afternoon. To deliver accountability, President Trump swiftly signed a memorandum directing an immediate assessment of the Federal Aviation Administration to ensure the federal government is maintaining the highest personnel and policy aviation safety standards. The memorandum directs the Secretary of Transportation and the FAA Administrator to immediately review all hiring decisions and changes to safety protocols made during the prior 4 years and to take all necessary corrective actions to achieve uncompromised aviation safety. The review will include a comprehensive assessment and reversal of any deterioration in hiring standards and aviation safety standards and protocols during the previous administration. Aviation safety was addressed by President Trump before this tragic collision even took place.
So President Trump sent out, and he got criticized for this, but it didn't even take effect yet. So he sent out a memo to, I believe, about 1,100 FAA employees, giving them that buyout offer. So that's why when you're hearing people blame Trump for, well, he cut the FAA right before he didn't even do that yet. He just sent them a letter saying, and we don't even know what their job title is within the FAA, what exactly they do, but he sent that memo, that buyout offer that he sent to millions of federal employees, basically offering them a buyout, and he did that to 1,100 people in the FAA.
On his second day in office, the president signed a memorandum to immediately stop Biden DEI hiring programs and return to non-discriminatory, merit-based hiring. And in 2018, during President Trump's first term, the Department of Transportation announced it would put an end, at that time, to use the biological questionnaire that was introduced by the Obama administration, which punished skilled applicants. President Trump has long led on the issue of aviation safety, and he will continue to do so. He will continue to deliver on the promises he made to the American people at record speed. The Senate has already confirmed 8 of President Trump's exceptional cabinet nominees, including most recently Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, as you of course know, EPA Secretary Lee Zeldin, and Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, who is scheduled to be sworn in later today. We expect the Senate to continue quickly confirming the remainder of President Trump's well-qualified nominees in the days ahead. Earlier this week in the East Room, the president proudly signed the Laken-Riley Act into law, surrounded by Laken's loving parents and sister.
They also are defunding. I did a video on it earlier. They are also defunding. They're temporarily pausing all federal funding for all of the NGOs that have helped facilitate the mass illegal immigration in our country. And that includes Catholic Charities, HIAS, the UN, all these people that were helping to facilitate this.
Common sense bipartisan law mandates the federal detention of illegal aliens who are accused of theft, burglary, assaulting a law enforcement officer, and any crime that causes death or serious bodily injury, like the animal who murdered Laken Riley in cold blood. This was the first piece of legislation President Trump proudly signed as the 47th president of the United States, and it will guarantee that Laken did not die in vain. As Laken's mother, Allison, tearfully said during the signing event, President Trump said he would secure our borders and that he would never forget about Laken, and he hasn't. He's a man of his word, and we trust that he will fight for the American people. Those are the words of Laken's mother, and we will never forget them. So to help lock up even more criminal illegal aliens, President Trump signed a memorandum this week to detain them at Guantanamo Bay. This action will expand the Migrant Operations Center at Naval Station Guantanamo Bay to full capacity to provide critical extra detention space for high-priority criminal illegals. Our brave ICE agents continue to arrest more and more of these types of individuals every day in communities across our country. And I have more updates for you. On January 27th, 2025,
So there's always been a migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. It's just not used. And this is very similar to what Australia does. Australia has an island where they put people, I think, that are, I don't know, seeking asylum or whatever. But that's exactly what Australia does. They're very protective over their country.
Chicago arrested a citizen of Guatemala who has been convicted of solicitation to meet a child, disturbing, and sentenced to 24 months probation. On January 28, 2025, ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of South Korea who has been convicted of 9 counts of possession or control of material depicting minors in sexually explicit conduct. On January 28th, ICE New York arrested a Mexican national previously charged by the state of New York for attempted murder and possession of a weapon and assault. And on January 28th, ICE Philly arrested a citizen of Mexico who has been convicted of possession of child pornography. Our message is simple. If you are a criminal illegal alien, you will be arrested and deported. On another important matter, the nation's report card was released this week, and the news is not good. It showed that U.S. students had record low reading comprehension scores last year. It's National School Choice Week, and in part of the president's commitment to education, he just left a roundtable in the Roosevelt Room focused on this issue with leaders from across the country. The national report card showed that 70% of 8th graders were below proficient in reading, and 40% of 4th graders did not even meet the basic reading levels. This is completely unacceptable to the president, and he continues to take aggressive actions to address this education problem in our country. He signed an executive order this week prohibiting federal funding of the indoctrination of our children, including radical gender ideology and critical race theory in the classroom. The president believes American education should focus on cultivating patriotic citizens who are ready for the workforce. And this action will help get schools back on track and defend fundamental parental rights in education. The president also signed a school choice executive order expanding educational freedom and opportunity for families. And in lighter news, but in exciting news, after announcing our briefing room changes on Wednesday, this White House has received more than 10,000 submissions from individuals across the country who are eager to join all of you. We might have to make this room a little bit bigger to do that, who want to participate in our new media seat at a future briefing. So in this seat today, we have the Ruthless podcast. They humbly started by entertaining small audiences on Capitol Hill, but after 4 years, this program has become one of the most influential podcasts in America. They previously reached #1 on the charts and earned over 25 million downloads as they deliver political news with a humorous touch. The hosts are Josh Holmes, Michael Duncan, Comfortably Smug, and the man joining us today, John Ashbrook. So with that, I will take your questions. John, please kick us off.
Thank you very much. Caroline, in your first briefing, the media went after this administration for deporting illegal immigrants they claimed were not criminals. The question is, do you think they're out of touch with Americans demanding action on our border crisis?
The media out of touch? I think the media certainly is out of touch. That's proven by a number of things, John. #1, there was a New York Times poll that was released prior to President Trump's inauguration by the New York Times, which of course is a legacy media outlet, that showed that 83% of Americans support deporting the individuals that you mentioned, illegal immigrant criminals.
Sorry to pause, but that is what is so frustrating about all of these local mayors and governors and city councils who are saying we're going to fight this. Look at how many people support this. I'm telling you right now, the overwhelming amount of Americans support it. And it's because they opened up the floodgates way too much. They did it way too much. And we saw way too many things happen. So many precious lives. Lake and Riley were lost. Little Jocelyn Nungery, the 12-year-old baby. So that's what's crazy. It's like you're calling Trump the tyrant and the dictator, but here you are. The American people are telling you we support this. We support having the criminals taken out, and you are fighting to keep the criminals here.
those who have committed heinous crimes in the interior of our country. And I received a very actually interesting statistic on this front from ICE this week. 97% of the deportations that this administration has made thus far are of individuals who had a removal order from the previous administration, but were never removed from the interior of our country. So this shows that the previous administration was actually defying our laws, and all this administration is doing is simply following the laws, the immigration laws of this great country. Thanks for the question, John. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, great.
Nice.
Peter.
Thanks, Caroline. If President Trump is telling us that air traffic control towers are staffed with unqualified controllers, these DEI hires who never should have been brought on, then it's not safe to fly commercially, is it?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday, and he believes that it is still indeed safe, and Americans should feel safe traveling our skies. With that said, two things can be true at the same time, and we certainly have seen the deterioration of federal hiring standards at the Federal Aviation Administration, and the president wants to increase those standards. He wants pilots in this country who have the great responsibility of flying American citizens by the tens of millions every single day to be chosen for that position based on their merit and their skills. And so the administration will prioritize this.
Was the air traffic controller in the DCA tower on Wednesday night hired or not fired at some point because of his or her race?
That investigation is ongoing, and so when we have updates on the exact individuals who were involved in the collision, including the air traffic controller, also the pilots of the helicopter and others, we will confirm those. I don't want to confirm names from this podium today. We're not in a position to do that. But I will say the president has still rightfully pointed out that there has been problems with the aviation industry over the past several years. And this started under Barack Obama in 2014.
And when the president says,
Someone asked about Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, they have a migrant facility on there to hold people that are being deported. So they're going to open that back up and use it looks like.
Truth Social, the Black Hawk helicopter.
Isn't it so nice to see someone? And my favorite thing about her, she doesn't even have one of those binders. They were like, are you going to have a binder in the future? And she said, my binder is up here. And this is what happens when you're confident in what you're saying and you feel like the truth is on your side. You don't have to stutter or word salad like we heard Corinne Jean-Pierre.
Flying too high by a lot. It was far above the 200-foot limit. That's not really too complicated to understand, is it? Is he suggesting a helicopter malfunction or a crew error or a crew doing this intentionally?
No, the president is simply stating what he said in that social post, which is that the helicopter was flying higher than it should have been, which is one of the reasons that led to this collision. And the other reasons for that are still being investigated, and I will let that investigation play out. Kelly.
Oh yeah, circle back Jen. I forgot about that. We had Jen was the first one, and then KGP was the other one. Circle back. Forgot about her.
Colleagues have obtained a memo from the Defense Intelligence Agency that talks about...
I don't think she's circled back once yet, has she? She's answered everything. No circle backs yet.
not holding any activities or programming related to Black History Month to be in line with the president's views on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Does the president plan to have a proclamation about Black History Month? In his first term, each of the 4 years of his term, he did so and called on those in government to have programming activities and celebrations. Is he going to do that this year?
Yeah, the president looks forward to signing a proclamation celebrating Black History Month. I actually spoke with our great staff secretary. It's in the works of being approved, and it's going to be ready for the president's signature to signify the beginning of that tomorrow.
If an agency is calling off those kinds of activities in an attempt to be in alignment...
Nature is healing. Also, you know what else I was reading today? Do you guys remember, what's his name? Kendi Abram X. He basically, he was the head of the anti-racist thing at, I think it was like Boston University or something. He was one of the big guys. Well, his whole department, they had to do 19 layoffs, and they said it's because public interest, nobody's giving them donations, nobody cares anymore, and now it's being closed and he's going to do something else. So nature is healing.
the president's views on DEI and other things. Should they adjust that now and have those programs and make those
Yes, you got it. Ibram X. Kendi. Yep.
however they see fit in the office?
The president is leading here at the White House, and I'll leave it to the proclamation that he will sign very soon.
I'm doing a live.
See you.
Thanks for having us. So I wanted to follow up on the gender executive orders you mentioned. First of all, we know that President Trump has taken a bunch of steps to protect children from irreversible transgender procedures. Is he interested in backing congressional legislation on this point? And does the Trump administration have interest in investigating doctors who perform these irreversible procedures on kids, such as a double mastectomy on a minor girl?
Well, the president has already taken a very strong stance on this issue this week with the signing of his executive order, a few executive orders in this space. First, he made it the official policy of the federal government that there are only two sexes, male and female, and we have directed all federal agencies to comply with that policy. As for congressional legislation to support the president's agenda in this space, and certainly ending the mutilation of young children, the chemical castration of young children, which is a barbaric practice that the vast majority of Americans do not support for young minor children. Certainly the president would support Congress's efforts, as he has already made that very clear this week. Jennifer.
On Rick Grinnell's trip to Venezuela to meet with Nicolas Maduro, is there anything you can share on timing on that? What his agenda is?
Richard Grinnell is going down to Venezuela to meet with Maduro, and they're basically going to be saying, no, you're taking back everybody. It's not a negotiation. They're going down there. I read the headline earlier today, or read the news story. So they're going down there and they're basically saying, yes, you will actually be taking back every member of TDA that we send you.
What the mission of that trip is?
Yes, so I can confirm that Rick Grinnell is in Venezuela today. I can confirm that Rick Grinnell is going to Venezuela, or is in Venezuela, with two immediate directives from the President of the United States. Number one, Rick Grinnell has been instructed to identify a place and ensure that repatriation flights of Tren de Aragua members, Venezuelan nationals who have broken our nation's will land in Venezuela. As I said at this podium a few days ago, we expect every nation on this planet to cooperate with the repatriation of our citizens, and so Rick Grinnell is in Venezuela to ensure that can continue. And number two, Rick Grinnell is in Venezuela to ensure that all U.S. detainees in Venezuela are returned home. That's his mission, and I will provide a readout after this trip.
On Bob Menendez, can you tell us if anyone has approached the White House or the president about a pardon or a commutation?
I have not been part of those discussions. If they have, I am not sure if they have, but I won't speculate on potential pardons that may or may not happen. To my awareness, the answer is no. Justin.
Friends at Reuters are reporting that the president has made a decision on the Canada and Mexico tariffs, but that they won't actually be implemented until March 1st. I was wondering if you could confirm that and talk through some of the president's things.
I saw that report, and it is false. I was just with the president in the Oval Office, and I can confirm that tomorrow, the February 1st deadline that President Trump put into place at a statement several weeks ago, continues. The president will be implementing tomorrow a 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and a 10% tariff on China for the illegal fentanyl that they have sourced and allowed to distribute into our country, which has killed tens of millions of Americans. These are promises made and promises kept by the president.
The president yesterday said that last night he was planning to discuss whether an exemption would be made on oil imports. Do you have any information on what decision he made there, or will there be exemptions at all offered under this?
I don't have an update or readout for you on the exemptions, but those tariffs will be for public consumption in about 24 hours tomorrow, so you can read them then. Stephen Nelson.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I have three questions, if that's all right. I'd like to ask you about press freedom and then about two economic matters. On press freedom, on Tuesday, you announced plans to roll back the more restrictive press badge policy of the Biden White House. But there's a different anti-press freedom policy I wanted to ask about. The Biden White House adopted a mysterious pre-screening process for journalists allowed into large event spaces that in the pre-pandemic days, first Trump term, were open open to all journalists on campus. This effectively limited the diversity of reporters present and blocked the asking questions that large segments of the American public wanted answered. As press secretary, can you commit to abolishing this mysterious pre-screening process?
There were a lot of mysterious processes that my team and I have had to unravel over the past 2 weeks that were implemented by the previous White House, and in particular.
I want to hear about all of them too. I bet there's so much stuff that we're not even aware of, like so much weird stuff that they were doing. I guarantee you.
Previous press shop here. And so I can commit to a greater access and transparency, which I believe we already have by ensuring that the 440 journalists whose credentials were revoked will be reinstalled. They will get their credentials if they wish to. We've also, of course, opened up a new seat to new media. And as far as open press events here at the White House, if we tell you it's open press, it's open press.
So just to confirm, this pre-screening thing is something you're aware of and you work to undo to the maximum extent possible.
When we say something is open press, it will mean it's open press.
It's economic matters, and I can just ask them both at once for you. In New York City, Governor Hochul's congestion pricing went into effect this month. Vehicles that drive through parts of Manhattan have to pay a $9 toll. President Trump has made clear his opposition. He said that it's, quote, the most progressive tax known to womankind. Will the administration be trying to block this? And the second question is, millions, maybe tens of millions of Americans who voted for President Trump were excited about his plans to do away with taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security benefits. But there's uncertainty about the timing of this. So can you clarify for them when this is going to happen? Does President Trump want this to be in all three of those in the first batch of legislation early this year?
Well, to answer your question in one swoop, I will say that President Trump is committed to lowering taxes for Americans, cutting taxes for Americans. As for congestion pricing in New York, I do know that the president spoke with Governor Hochul about that. I don't have any, actions, so to speak, to read out.
Oh, apparently they've spoken, Trump and Governor Hochul have spoken, I think, 2 times over the phone about ending congestion pricing, possibly. But it still sounds like the leaders in New York City, they still very much like it.
On that issue today. Number 2, when it comes to no taxes on tips and Social Security, the president has made it very clear to our allies on Capitol Hill that is
right. I feel like Social Security shouldn't be taxed, especially for older individuals who are collecting it.
Piece of this reconciliation package, and he expects that his tax cuts from 2017, which put a lot more money back into the American people's pockets, those must be implemented, and no tax on tips. The president is intent on delivering on that promise, and he will get it done.
Overtime also as part of reconciliation?
Yes. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. Can you guarantee that those tariffs...
That would be nice if overtime... bonuses. It would be nice if bonuses weren't taxed. Have you ever gotten a bonus at work and then they take 40% of it?
Increase prices for Americans, including at the gas pump in the grocery store?
I think Americans who are concerned about prices should look at what President Trump did in his first term. He effectively implemented tariffs, and the average inflation rate during the first Trump administration was 1.9%. In fact, when President Trump left office, it was 1.4%. So President Trump is going to do everything he possibly can to cut the inflation crisis that the previous administration...
Actually, that is true. If your income is low enough, you usually get all your taxes back at the end of the year.
On the American people, and he will continue to effectively utilize tariffs.
If those tariffs do increase prices for Americans, will the administration reverse them?
That's a hypothetical question, and the president is intent on ensuring that he effectively implements tariffs while cutting inflation and costs for the American people. And, the media has this way of just looking at everything in a microscope rather than looking at the whole of government economic approach that this president is taking. He will effectively implement tariffs. He's also, as I just answered Prince Stephen's question, committed to tax cuts. He's also clearly committed, as evidenced by his executive orders, to unleashing the might of our energy industry, which we know will eventually drive down inflation. And all the economic measures that this president has made will have a Trump incoming economic boom, just like we saw in our first term.
And has the White House found any...
Fox Business, yes.
Thanks, Carol. Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, said today that if the U.S. imposes tariffs, he will respond and he will not relent until the tariffs are removed. Are we seeing the start of a trade war with Canada?
I don't think so. I think the president is going to implement those tariffs tomorrow, and he will respond to Mr. Trudeau's comments in due time, I am sure.
What type of things have to happen? What does the administration need to see in order to avoid those tariffs?
Well, the tariffs are incoming tomorrow on Canada, and the reason for that is because both Canada and Mexico have allowed an unprecedented invasion of illegal fentanyl that is killing American citizens and also illegal immigrants into our country. In fact, I have more language for you right here. Canada, Mexico, and China, which, as I mentioned, President Trump will implement a 10% tariff on China, have all enabled illegal drugs to pour into America. The amount of fentanyl that has been seized at the southern border in the last 2 years alone has the potential to kill tens of millions of Americans. And so the president is intent on doing this. And I think Justin Trudeau would be wise to talk to President Trump directly before pushing outlandish comments like that to the media.
If I may, one more question. Let me go back to the plane crash for just 1 second.
You're interrupting your colleague, but sure.
Sorry, I thought you called on me.
I called on Lindsay.
The president this morning said the Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high. I'm wondering if he's basing that on what he learned from investigators, and if you could offer a little bit more of a window into how he is keeping abreast of this investigation.
Sure.
Is the NTSB briefing him separately? Is he meeting in the Situation Room? You just sort of offer a window into that.
Yeah, the president based that statement on truth, because it is truth and it's fact, and it was relayed to him by the authorities who are overseeing the investigation into this horrific plane collision. And the president, as I said in my opening remarks, continues to be briefed on collision by everybody across his cabinet, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Defense, the NTSB, who the commissioner there was in the Oval Office with him yesterday. Lindsay. Lindsay, go ahead. Lindsay, go ahead.
In recent days, the CIA actually revealed that they do also believe that COVID-19 was from a lab leak in Wuhan, China. How is the president planning on responding to this additional intel from the CIA, and will it impact how he responds to the tariffs?
Yeah, kudos to John Ratcliffe for revealing that truth and that fact to the American people. Many years too late, the Biden administration had a chance to let the American people know the truth about that, and for some reason, they chose not to. I also would just like to point out that several years ago, when I was working in this press shop and President Trump would take to this podium to brief the American people on COVID-19, he suggested that COVID very well may have came from a lab in Wuhan, China. And many members in this very room mocked him for that, said he was spewing conspiracy theories. He was not. We now know that to be the confirmable truth. It took many years for it to come out, but the president was right in this instance again. Sure.
Caroline, thank you. I wanted to ask about Secretary Rubio's trip to Panama first. Sure. What did the conversations look like with President Trump on that?
It's coming from them.
President of Panama says it is, quote, impossible to negotiate over the canal. So what are you expecting from this visit?
So
that interference is coming from their mic. Sorry.
Present for Secretary Rubio's conversations with President Trump about the Panama Canal. I have been present for President Trump's own thoughts on the Panama Canal, and you've all seen them as well in his public statements that he has shown. He believes it's unacceptable that the canal is essentially run by the Chinese Communist Party. If you look at both ends of the canal, massive Chinese Communist Party linked companies run the canal. That's unfair to the American people, many of whom lost their lives many years ago building this canal. The American taxpayers are paying millions of dollars for the canal, and the president believes it's in our national interest as a nation for Secretary Rubio to go there and begin these discussions, and that's exactly why he's doing that.
Caroline.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Is the United States in the process of pulling out of Syria militarily? Because the president wanted to do that in his first term as well, and he had a lot of pushback from the Pentagon and Congress. And based on what he said yesterday, is he considering doing that in a short time?
The president was asked and answered this question yesterday, and he, as the commander-in-chief of the United States military, reserves the right to review troop deployments overseas at any point in time.
Is that a topic right now?
Yes.
Thank you.
question. So we now know that the staffing was not normal at the air traffic tower, and so with the government freezing the hiring of new federal workers and offering buyouts, are you not afraid that more incidents of different kind could happen with less staffing in different agencies?
Well, the president is intent on ensuring that we are increasing staffing at these agencies, and that's why he signed a very strong executive order on his second day in office, immediately terminating DEI hiring practices at the FAA. He also, following the tragic crash, as you all know, in the Oval Office yesterday, signed a memorandum directing an immediate assessment of the FAA to ensure the federal government is maintaining the highest personnel and aviation safety standards. And I would also just say there's a cultural piece to this as well. If you are an American who has spent many years studying aviation and you graduate from school and you're an air traffic controller based on skill and merit, and then you apply for a job and you're forced to fill out a biographical questionnaire asking you the color of your skin and asking you where you're from in details that aren't relevant at all to the job description, I think that deteriorates the morale of people in this industry. And if you talk to people in this industry, they'll tell you that. In fact, many of them filed a lawsuit against the FAA a couple of years ago under Joe Biden's administration because they were denied positions because of this DEI hiring practice that was putting identity politics over merit and skills. That's unacceptable. And I think just to put a fine point on this, because this is the third or fourth question I've answered on this subject, when you are flying on an airplane with your loved ones, which every one of us in this room has, do you pray that your plane lands safely and gets you to your destination, or do you pray that the pilot has a certain skin color? I think we all know the answer to that question, and as President Trump said yesterday, it's common sense. Rob Crilly.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on that last question, actually. Has there been any sort of assurance from the FAA that they will immediately improve staffing levels, given the reports of not normal staffing levels on Wednesday?
Oh, absolutely. You had Secretary Duffy here yesterday at the White House at this podium saying that he is on it, and we can all trust that he definitely will be. John Decker.
Thanks a lot, Carol. You called me, right?
Yes, I did.
Thank you very much.
As long as your name's still John Decker.
It is. Absolutely. Thank you. The president's meeting today with the founder and CEO of NVIDIA. What is that meeting concerning, and who sought that meeting?
I don't have details on this. It's a private meeting. It will take place at 2:30 p.m. I'll try to get there in time, and I can let you know after. How's that?
On Guantanamo Bay, can you give more details about setting up that detention facility at Gitmo? How will that come about? What's the timing in terms of standing it up? And of course, this has happened before during the Clinton administration.
Yeah, that's right.
Detainees of Cuban and Haitian descent were both detained at Guantanamo. Are you looking at that model in setting up this detention facility?
Secretary Hegseth, I believe, was on television this morning answering this question, and he said that the Department of Defense is already on it. He has directed his agency to ensure that Gitmo is increasing their capacity for beds, and that's exactly what President Trump's executive order did. It directed Secretary Hegseth and also Secretary Noem to expand the Migrant Operations Center at the Naval Station to provide for this extra detention space. And as Secretary Hegseth confirmed this morning, that operation is underway. Sure.
Caroline, on the tariffs, can you clarify whether those will actually be going into effect tomorrow, or whether there might be some lead time?
Yes.
And are those, they will be going into effect?
Correct.
And are those meant to be in place long term, or is there a scenario in which Canada, Mexico, and China can offer concessions and then they would be removed?
At this point, the president has made it very clear those tariffs are going to be implemented and in effect. If the president at any time decides to roll back those tariffs, I'll leave it to him to make that decision. But starting tomorrow,
Anthony, yes, it's mostly political. I talk about politics and culture.
Will be in place. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline.
Yes.
Can you confirm a report by our friends at the Daily Mail that the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is going to be visiting the White House in February? And also, if I may, do you have any more details on Netanyahu's visit here next week?
Sure. I have not seen that report about the Prime Minister. I can go check back with our friends at the National Security Council.
It's a cooking channel. I want to have a cooking channel. I like to cook.
And get back to you on that. I can confirm that Prime Minister Netanyahu will be here on Tuesday, February 4th, for a working meeting and visit with the president. And I'm sure you will all be here, very excited to cover that visit. Sure. Daniel.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.
Back on the Guantanamo Bay subject. Specifically, obviously,
does the president feel like that's the best location or a good location
Why would
to
it
make
not
sure that
be?
Americans are safe from violent, illegal migrant crime?
Well, it's a really good question, and the memorandum that he signed, the order that he signed, builds on his previous executive actions, obviously, to secure our southern border and deport illegal criminals from the interior of our country. We know that we have an issue with detention space here in the interior, which is a big reason why Congress needs to pass this reconciliation package as quickly as possible to ensure that DHS and ICE funding they need to detain these individuals, that the administration is very swiftly rounding up and deporting, arresting and deporting these illegal immigrant criminals. And so the president feels it's an appropriate place. Taxpayers are already funding it. The space is there. Why not use it? And the Secretary of Defense, as I said, is working on that as we speak. Sure. Yes.
Thank you so much for having me here answering a question. So I want to talk more about the success that ICE is having finding these violent criminal aliens, some of them being sexual predators. But my friend Ben Berquam reports that the Chicago mayor and the Illinois governor are preventing ICE agents from going into jails and prisons to enforce detainers against illegal aliens. In Maryland, the Attorney General has also put out a memo hindering local police cooperation with ICE. Does the administration...
Just so you, oh no, it's my first time watching this. Hi, Glenn. Just so a lot of jails so I'm in Virginia right now, and something I learned about the state of Virginia, we're not a sanctuary state. We're not supposed to have sanctuary cities, but what the jails will do is the jails will be sanctuary. Does that make sense? So the jails themselves decide not to coordinate with ICE. Why you would do that, I have no idea, because if someone is arrested, clearly they committed another crime, but the jails will not help ICE, so they're being released back out into the community.
Any comment on leftist state medical officials defying ICE and Trump's deportation efforts?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that Democrat officials in these cities who have been completely overrun and overwhelmed by illegal immigrant criminals would refuse support and help to cure this problem that has especially taken over their cities. I guess they don't want to admit they've been wrong with their sanctuary city policies. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask them about their intentions, but they would be very wise to comply with this administration, because this administration is hell-bent on enforcing our nation's immigration laws, and this administration will continue to arrest and detain and deport illegal migrant criminals. And what we won't do is defy our nation's immigration laws like the previous administration, who had these orders of removal on illegal immigrants across the country and were refusing to execute on them. We will continue to remove illegal criminals from our nation's interior.
Are these sanctuary city leaders, are they violating law?
I would certainly think so. I'd have to check back on which specific law they're violating, but certainly if they're not enforcing our nation's immigration law, sounds like they are breaking the law. And I would also add that their constituents don't approve of that. You've seen residents in Chicago show up at their city council meetings infuriated with their leadership in that city, because they are working very hard to provide for their families. They want public safety and law and order, and their officials have abandoned those very basic American principles in these cities. And the American people want law and order. It's, again, an overwhelmingly popular policy to deport illegal criminals from our nation's interior, and this administration will continue to affect that goal.
A question on Colombia. We just interviewed Colombian President Gustavo Petro, and he insisted that he's not going to take any Colombian deportee from the U.S. if they arrive in South America handcuffed. How this administration responds to that?
When did the Colombian president make those remarks?
Today, during an interview with us at Univision.
Well, I will share those with the President of the United States, and I will get back to you on his response.
What happens if Nicolas Maduro?
Caroline, there are more than 150,000 disabled Americans who are working today. The president talked a lot yesterday about hiring the best and the brightest to work in the federal government. Safety aside, does he believe that disabled people do have a place to work in the federal government, and does he also support the current protections for disabled people working in the private sector as well?
The president has made it very clear that this is a common sense solution to solving some of the problems that we have seen at the Federal Aviation Administration, and also when it comes to many of the federal agencies across our government. People should not be hired based on their disabilities, based on their skin color, their gender, their race. None of that matters. What matters to this president and this administration is how well you can do your job, and the American people agree with that sentiment. So it's about competence, skill, and merit. And so the president is focused on ensuring that the most competent individuals, the best and the brightest in this country, are in positions in this federal government, especially when it comes to public safety. Can't overemphasize the importance of those jobs. Sure.
So just follow up on her question before, President Trump is holding China accountable on fentanyl by ramping up tariffs. So how is President Trump planning to hold China accountable on COVID origins?
I haven't spoken to the president about the COVID origins specifically in regards to any actions he may or may not take when it comes to China. But as I have previewed quite a few times today, he will be implementing a 10% tariff on China tomorrow. Sure. Hi.
Has the president made up his mind about a timeline for tariffs on the EU?
No, he has not.
And will it be a one-size-fit-all, or will it be differentiated among governments?
I won't get ahead of the president on tariffs when it comes to the European Union. What I can tell you, again, is that the president will be implementing 25% on Canada, 25% on Mexico, 10% on China tomorrow for the reasons that I have repeatedly laid out in this briefing. Newsmax, go ahead. Yes.
Newsmax is good.
No, the gentleman behind you.
James Rosen.
Yes, James. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Two quick questions on foreign policy, and then one very long and tedious and ponderous Rosen question thereafter. First, on Iran, we've heard very little about the president's forthcoming Iran policy besides his determination to prevent that nation from achieving a nuclear weapons capability. Is it the president's objective, short of the use of U.S. military force, to use the broad array of his powers to try to hasten the end of the Iranian regime?
I think the president has actually made his position on Iran very clear, and he made that clear when there were the negotiations about the ceasefire, which we know obviously is now in place, and the deadline on that ceasefire has continued. He said that Hamas and Iranian-backed terrorists would have hell to pay if that ceasefire didn't move forward, and then quickly thereafter it did. I also do have news on the hostage front, which I'm very surprised nobody asked about this because it is big news story, and the White House applauds the release of 8 additional hostages from Hamas captivity, thanks to the ceasefire deal secured by President Trump. 3 Israeli and 5 Thai nationals are being reunited with their families and their loved ones after being held in unspeakable conditions for over 15 months. And the president remains committed to the release of all remaining hostages, and they should have never been taken by the brutal terrorist group Hamas in the first place. And I think President Trump's working meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister next week emphasizes his continued support for Israel and ensuring that brutal terrorists in that region have hell to pay. Sure.
Can I just finish the other 2 questions?
Sure.
I know you want the long, ponderous Rosen. But first, on the Grinnell trip, as you know, under the previous administration.
So if you just joined in, Richard Grinnell is going down to Venezuela, I believe today, today. He's going down to visit Venezuela to meet with Maduro, and they're basically telling him, it's not a negotiation type of meeting. It's expected to be really short. And they're basically telling Maduro, you will be taking back every single person that we send back to your country, including all of the TDA members. You will be taking those back. So that's what this trip is.
The U.S. recognized the opposition candidate in last year's elections, Edmundo Gonzalez, now exiled, as the legitimate president of Venezuela. Does the president's dispatching of Ambassador Grinnell to negotiate directly with President Maduro today that the U.S. now officially recognizes President Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela?
Absolutely not. As I made it very clear, former ambassador and now special envoy Rick Grinnell is going to Venezuela with 2 very clear directives. Make sure that Tren de Aragua members, of which there are 400 currently in custody, are repatriated back to Venezuela, and that all United States detainees return home. Thank you very much, guys.
Just on the president's use of language in this room yesterday, and without seeking to cast myself as some kind of moral exemplar because it's rather late in the day to try. Nonetheless, this was an event yesterday that began with a moment of silence for the victims of the air crash and the president's own invocation of, quote, a loving God. And then he uncorked that expletive to insult a former cabinet officer.
It was the same expletive that I saw him use in the East Room in 2020 when he famously held up the Trump acquitted headline. My question is, if you could shed any light for us on how the president perceives his use of public profanity, which is a practice that certainly sets him apart from all of his predecessors. Does he regard it as an effective communications device, part of his appeal, or is it something that he lapses into inadvertently, perhaps in times of frustration and later regrets?
I think one of the things that the American people love most about this president is that he often says what they are thinking, but sometimes lack the courage to say themselves. And I think yesterday at this podium,
Good
you
answer.
heard President Trump express great frustration, perhaps even anger, with the previous administration's policies, many of which have led to the crises that our country is currently facing and that this president is focused on.
She does kind of remind me of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. A little bit, yeah. The movie version.
Thank you guys very much. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
All right. What was that? The second press briefing? Aren't you just so excited that these are so much more fun to watch now? Yeah, so that meeting down to Venezuela, it's not a negotiation. I was reading about it earlier. It's not a negotiation. They're going down there basically to be like, yeah, you're taking them back and you're giving us all of the Americans. Buffy. Hold on, let's see what the original one looks like. Original. Yeah, she kind of looks like her. A little bit. A little bit. I see it. Sorry, that's not the best. I see it. All right. Oh yeah, and I told you guys earlier, so they're defunding. Okay, sorry, that's not where I want it to be. So they are defunding. They're also, well, they're not completely defunding them, but they're putting a temporary pause on all of the grant funding for all of the NGOs that helped facilitate illegal immigration into our country. So all of their federal funding is temporarily paused. So that's Catholic Charities, that's the UN, that's HIAS, I think Jewish Family Services. There's a lot of them, and they're going to be doing an investigation to look into them and what's been going on. And just to show you, this is what they do. So this is a map that the UN gives out. So they're setting up shop in Mexico, helping people to get back up to the US, even showing them like areas that they can cross the border. And this is what one of them is. So this is one of the ones by the UN, and this is why they're getting defunded. So they have these like maps of Mexico and like how to get up here.
Hey, United Nations, I think you dropped this. It's your map on how to get people help that are illegally traveling through Mexico. El Salvador, Guatemala,
Everywhere.
Honduras.
So they're all getting defunded or paused. But I have a feeling it will be
map.
permanent. And this is basically, with these NGOs, this is basically how they get away with having a shadow government. This is basically how they get away with funding all of these things and subverting the American will. The Red Cross. Hold on, let me see if I can find the Red Cross map. The Red Cross has one too. Yep. And here's the Red Cross. Right there. And they have places set up all throughout Mexico. And keep in mind that the trek, people coming up through that way through Mexico, a lot of them came up through the Darien Gap. I mean, they're subjecting themselves to cartel members, all kinds of crimes, sexual assault. I mean, all kinds of stuff they're being subjected to on these journeys. And then you have these nonprofits who are supposed to help people, helping them. No, let me tell you, who's being helped the most by this mass movement of people are these NGOs, are these nonprofits, because they're making a killing on all of this. And that's what it's really all about. It's really like, once you look into this, once you look at who's coming here, what they're leaving, and what they're coming to in America, you realize that the only ones that are really benefiting are the people that are making money off of all of this. And that's what their true incentive is. So I think it's wonderful that their funding is being blocked until they can investigate and figure out what the heck is going on. You bought a ukulele? I had mine earlier, but I have to tune it. I was playing it, I have to tune it and I need to practice. It sounds bad. Yeah, it's very out of tune, but I was practicing it earlier. I was like, I need to get back on it because I haven't played it in a while. And I'm very rusty, but I'm going to practice it tonight. That's what I'm going to do tonight. All right, you all. Well, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining. I'm glad we got to watch that press conference. Hopefully, I'll have a lot more fun content coming out too, because I think nature is healing itself. We finally have a common sense back in the White House, and it's a lot more fun to watch the press briefings. No, I don't have ADHD. I get really, maybe I do have ADHD, but I get distracted by the chat. It sounds bad. I told you it was going to sound bad. Jeez. Well, first of all, it's severely out of tune, and I haven't practiced in a really long time. Okay, but I have fun doing it, and that's all that matters. All right, you all, you have a great day. Thank you for joining. I'll see you later. I used to watch KJP on mute. I couldn't even watch the press briefings. I just had to watch clips after. I could not sit there for an entire press briefing. Just wasn't going to happen. All right, bye. How do I turn this thing off? I always, oh, there we go. Okay, see you guys.